The media fixates on kinetic hardware. A U.S. carrier strike group moves toward the Middle East, and the world watches for missiles. This is a strategic error. The primary vector of systemic risk is not the launch. It is the preceding silence. While legacy news tracked aircraft, a Russian Vishnya-class intelligence ship, hull number 535, was operating near Japan's Yonaguni Island. Public records confirm its transit path placed it directly over the undersea fiber optic cables that serve as the central nervous system for global markets and military command. This subsea vector is mirrored in orbit. Analysts at CSIS and RUSI have documented the proliferation of low-cost, deniable electronic warfare platforms. Their sole function is not kinetic destruction, but temporary, debilitating satellite blinding, severing the optic nerve of an adversary's command structure without triggering a launch-on warning protocol. The result is the strategic objective: to create a blind Leviathan, a superpower stripped of its data feeds and communication links, rendered inert. Its multi-trillion-dollar military apparatus becomes a liability, a fleet of colossal, indefensible assets operating in absolute darkness. This is the mathematical certainty of asymmetric warfare. The kinetic cost to neutralize the world's most expensive military is simply the cost of silence. The pivot to asymmetry is not a strategic choice. It is a symptom of a solvency crisis. A conventional, kinetic war is the fastest vector to national bankruptcy. According to analysis from institutions like CSIS, a protracted conflict like the one initiated by Russia becomes a catastrophic domestic liability. It depletes financial reserves, erodes political capital, and accelerates a state's economic decline. This is not warfare. It is a state-level margin call. When a nation can no longer afford to project power through traditional means, it is forced to innovate. Weakness becomes the accelerant for a new military doctrine. The objective shifts from battlefield victory to inflicting maximum economic damage at the lowest possible cost. This is a mathematical certainty. Consider the balance sheet. The deployment of a single U.S. carrier strike group, as seen in the Middle East, represents an immense kinetic cost, a multi-billion-dollar liability on the water. In contrast, the market for mercenary drone operators and coders is now a global liquidity pool of force, as detailed by the Modern War Institute. An attack on Poland's heating grid, executed by a deniable cyber unit, costs fractions of a percent of a single fighter jet's fuel load, yet achieves strategic-level disruption. This is why we observe Russian intelligence gathering ships probing Japanese contiguous zones. It is not a precursor to a naval invasion. That is fiscally impossible. It is low-cost reconnaissance to map vulnerabilities for low-cost, high-impact asymmetric strikes. The war is no longer about destroying an army. It is about engineering an opponent's insolvency. The motive, therefore, is pure economic survival. Unable to compete symmetrically, a weaker state must change the rules of the game. It must leverage deniable cheap vectors to bypass the superpower's primary military assets, attacking the civilian and economic infrastructure directly. The solvency crisis forces the war off the battlefield and onto the balance sheet. The core of the asymmetric blueprint is a mathematical attack on a superpower's balance sheet. According to analysts at RUSI, the Royal United Services Institute, the kinetic cost exchange is now terminally inverted. A $5 million main battle tank can be mission killed by a $500 FPV drone operated by a mercenary. This is not a balanced fight. It is a solvency crisis for conventional military doctrine. This economic reality powers what strategists call the democratization of violence. The state no longer holds the monopoly on effective, high-impact force. The market is now flooded with low-cost, high-lethality options, from freelance drone operators to state-backed cyber units capable of attacking critical infrastructure like a heating grid. Each attack vector is cheap, deniable, and infinitely scalable, turning a nation's most expensive assets, like a multi-billion-dollar carrier strike group, into a strategic liability, an indefensible target in a war of 1,000 economic cuts. The new front line is not a battlefield. It is a gray zone, a proxy laboratory designed to look like a stable, developed nation. This is not a mistake. It's a feature of the new blueprint for systemic conflict. The objective is to stage low-cost, deniable attacks on critical infrastructure to test response protocols. Exhibit A. The recent foiled cyber attack on Poland's heating grid. Analysts at CSIS confirm this was not vandalism. It was a clinical test of a Western nation's resilience. These gray zones are meticulously selected. State-backed intelligence assets, like the Russian Vishnya-class spy ship recently operating near Japan, are not on sightseeing tours. They are mapping the seams, the legal and electronic vulnerabilities of allied nations. This is where the new market for force is activated. Reports from the Modern War Institute detail the proliferation of mercenary drone operators and coders. They are the deniable vector, the human capital that executes the attack, launched from a server thousands of miles away. This asymmetric model makes conventional power a liability. A $10 billion U.S. carrier strike group in the Middle East cannot stop a cyber attack on a European power grid. The kinetic cost of retaliation is impossibly high against a deniable non-state actor. It is an unsolvable equation. These gray zones, regions with underlying political or economic instability, are the staging grounds. RUSI analysts warn they function as laboratories to perfect the methods of systemic disruption before they are deployed against primary targets. This isn't about regional chaos, it's about weaponizing it. The mathematical certainty is this: the next 12 months will see a coordinated, multi-domain test across several of these gray zones simultaneously. A minor port disruption, a localized grid failure, a communications blackout, all designed to stress the alliance's decision-making to its breaking point and measure the launch-on-warning threshold. The launch-on-warning doctrine is not a policy of aggression. It is a mathematical protocol born from the Cold War. The logic is absolute. If early warning systems detect an incoming strategic nuclear strike, you launch a full retaliatory strike before the incoming warheads can destroy your own assets. Waiting for absolute confirmation is not an option, as that would guarantee your own annihilation. It is a system designed to make a first strike logically untenable. This protocol is now the primary target of asymmetric warfare. The new vector of attack is not kinetic, it is informational. According to CSIS analysis, the objective is to induce the fog of digital war. State-backed or mercenary coders, a growing market force post-Ukraine, source NR3, can now target the command, control, and communications infrastructure that underpins nuclear decision-making. We have seen attempts on less critical systems, like the foiled attack on Poland's heating grid, source number 4. Applied to strategic early warning radar, the effect is catastrophic. A commander in a nuclear bunker is now confronted with an information solvency crisis. The screens are black. Is it a system glitch? Or is it a deliberate blinding attack, masking an incoming first strike? This ambiguity is the weapon. In a high-tension environment, with intelligence collection ships operating in proximity, source number 1, and carrier strike groups on high alert, source number 2, the margin for error is 0. The cyber attack creates an unsolvable dilemma. The kinetic cost of absorbing a real first strike is national extinction. The launch protocol, however, has not been rewritten for this scenario. The fear of being disarmed while waiting for clarification forces the commander's hand. The aggressor never has to fire a missile. They only have to create digital silence. This forces the superpower to choose between paralysis or initiating global thermonuclear war based on a blank screen. This is the new blueprint for systemic risk. The deployment of a U.S. carrier strike group to the Middle East is not a show of strength. It is a calculated drain on strategic attention and resources. The emerging market for mercenary drone operators and coders, documented by the Modern War Institute, provides the deniable vector to exploit this vacuum. Analysts at CSIS note that the reconnaissance phase is already complete. The transit of a Russian Vishnya-class intelligence ship near Japan's Miyako and Yonaguni Islands was not a passive observation. It was the digital mapping of critical infrastructure for a future strike. The blueprint was tested in Europe, where Poland's cyber defenses narrowly foiled an attack on its heating grid. The next phase is not a test. It is a calibration shot to measure the kinetic cost of a Western response. Within the next 12 months, expect a multi-hour, unattributable blackout of the port of Naha's terminal operating system in Okinawa. The objective is not destruction, but to force a solvency crisis in supply chain logistics, demonstrating that a nation's most expensive military assets are a liability against an enemy with no return address.